This week on Womb Envy, we discussed how womb envy would not win. And how we know that is by looking at the beginning. In order to understand the ending of a thing, you must first understand its beginning. The video title, Priestess Exit the Zoo so Eve can leave the garden, is all about the bloodline. So welcome to the bloodline. We're talking about the Chamba. If you follow our sister channel, Great Mother Speaks, and you've listened to the narrated readings of Vivian Hunter Hindru Amengazi Mama Zogbe's trilogy, Mami Wata Volumes 1, 2, and the Sibyls, the first prophetess of Mami Wata, then you know Chamba are the descendants of the Mami Wata priestesshood, which descends from the Mami Isis priestesshood, which descends from the original priestess orders of Mayat. This is deep time. Whenever we're talking about highly melanated people, we're talking about deep time. And so we have to break down our time periods. And for that reason, we've spent a great deal of time looking at what we've been taught to believe. And that means we've been looking at recent history relative to where we are on the planet, and as Chamba, spiritually, in our religious beliefs, that being biblical, the defilement of Sibylline oracles to contain the Sibyl seed, the melanin seed. There's a series on the Great Mother Speaks channel right now about the embodiment of that seed, which is what we are. The origins of the Chamba, again, this is very deep time, goes back to the Numo. And that is on Great Mother Speaks as well. See, Great Mother Speaks is going to always be that portal where you go in order to get that internal restoration of the spirit, in order to find the deep research, the what of who we are, and the history of what has happened. The Womb Envy projects that history. And beyond looking into that internal restoration, although that's still important, Great Mother Speaks is focused on the Sugui preparation, which is part of the Dogon cosmology and is what is occurring right now in this Pisces Saturn-Neptune conjunction era we're experiencing right now in the sidereal astronomy, not Western astrology. There are some aspects of this when going into deep time that make explaining these things quite challenging, and I just do my best because it took me a long time to understand. And like I said in my narration of Vivian Hunter Hindru's works, I'm that kind of learner. When I learn something, I speak it out to share it. So I try to be deliberate and purposeful when I do that. But I understand these concepts requires some steeping, as Great Mother says in the priestess tradition. Now, one of the ways to break this down in relationship to our topic today and our recent understanding of where we are spiritually has to do with the time we have spent on the Womb Envy channel, projecting the serpent symbology. Of course, the Mami Wata priestesshood used the eel serpent. And we've been discussing Eve and her relationship to it in the garden. This week, we talked about her predecessor, Lilith. This is an important point of discussion because what we're projecting is why. GMS deals with the what. Womb Envy Project is answering why did this happen? Why did the new mode descend unto the earth and teach civilization? Why did the Mami Wata priestesshood emerge in Europe out of Africa? Why were they demoted first in Kemet and then again throughout the Levant and Greece and later Rome? So that's the goal of the Womb Envy channel. So we answered why in the priestess exit the zoo so Eve can leave the garden this week so that we can come back here to the Bloodline on Substack and unpack what this is about. Now, the making it easy part. Okay. So, the zoo. The zoo is an enclosed structure that is called Paradise. And the video goes into all of that and what that's about. But basically, the Garden of Eve, the Garden of Eden is a zoo, okay? And this zoo is the basis of what we now know as Western civilization, which is grounded in the Abrahamic religions, which are grounded in the Mami Isis tradition, which is what we carry. Now, we carry it for a number of reasons, primarily due to the fact that we're highly melanated, although there can be some lightly melanated people who are Chamba as well. It's rare. That's another discussion. But the migrations from the heart of Africa that we've done throughout the millennia has been to protect the Kemetan seed, which is the knowledge of the liquid law. Liquid law is what the Nomo brought to early humans to teach civilization, all the things that we always hear: astrology, agriculture, writing, hygiene, irrigation, all of these things that we are taught all over the world, that these people, these beings from the water came and taught humanity, whether we're talking about Mesopotamia with Tiamat, whether we're talking about the Maya, the Mu, in Polynesia and Hawaii, all over the world. This story is recorded. The Australians talking about the rainbow serpent. So the Numu are Amma's children. They descended on the planet at just the point in time the consciousness of humanity was able to receive what they were going to be taught in order to prosper in the Garden of Eden, in the beautiful earth that in and of itself is sufficient law. And that's the liquid law, the honoring of that law, the honoring of the seasons, not in a Western or tropical astrological aspect, but in regard to how the elements interacted and how we as beings of consciousness interact. So the first numo represented the first 4 twin sets and the first 4 priestess orders. And that's why the religion of Vodun is the oldest religion on earth, because it is based on these nature spirits. Okay? And so that's what that's all about. The liquid law says nature is the only authority because it honors the consciousness of the individual, which is an expression of divinity operating within the law. So we've talked a bit about how the priestesses have been a part of this channeling of information from these deities who are not intended to be worshipped, but as frequencies to commune with in order to understand the cosmos. So we have a situation where we're looking at deep time, the origins of time, and the understanding of earth through Sobek, the understanding of fire through Anpu, water through Aset, and ether through Heteru. Of course, Heteru also means intuition, the confirmation of the downloads that are received. Aset means the atmosphere, the environment. All of these things are represented in our biochemistry with the atom and the electrons, electromagnetism. All of these things are represented through these 4 original orders. Sobek representing the threshold, the opening of the doors, looking at beginnings, but also specifically water and waterways, which was the threshold for the entry of the pneumo. And Ampu representing the fire of transformation, be it through initiation as a priestess or as life coming into through birth, or life going out of as death. And so the Hall of Mirrors being the symbolic representation of the new moon twins. This is deep time. This is, in fact, the first time. And so we've had these periods of time marked by climatic changes, extreme climatic changes, and changes throughout humanity 4 times. And so we're entering the 5th one, and they're called the yugas in Hinduism and Vedic astrology as well. And they always hit at this time when in the Vedic sidereal astrology, Saturn and Neptune are conjunct in Pisces, which will be exact in the next few days, as well as a solar eclipse in Aquarius. So a lot of endings there. And this star reading was directly aligned with the cosmos as sidereal astrology is. Now, This first phase shifted about 18,000 years ago with the first reset. And that is high civilization for matriarchy. It had been millennia and millennia and millennia of learning civilization and aligning the liquid law with these energies. 12,000 years ago, there was another shift and another reset, which we call the younger dryas. These periods are called the drying of the earth because the consciousness of humanity gets to a point where it's not honoring the liquid law. And so I'm trying to finally get to the point where we are in Western civilization. It just showed up. It just got here 5 minutes ago. So bear with me. That's younger dryas. And that period was very stressful. And it was the first time that there was a realization that the practices of agriculture really had to be honed in. And that's where we saw the establishment of these civilizations, these matriarchal civilizations all over the world that are being uncovered now, is that they were trying to, after this ice age, be in one settled area, which they had been for periods before, but actually establishing small city-states. And some of them were very, very large. The Mississippi was huge. It was like 1 million, 2 million people. And so, again, these history research items that I'm bringing up are all on Great Mother Speaks. Now, since then, in the last 6,000 years, there has been a gradual demotion of the priestesshood. There's been a gradual usurpation of her power. And this is where Vivian Hunter Hendrew's work enters. It enters right at this particular phase. And it is during this period that we see the Mamiaisis priestesses immigrating from the Kemet Kush area to the north of Africa. At that time, now that we know today as Mediterranean and the Levant, and up into Turkey. And they had been even up into Turkey since the Ice Age. All of this is highly melanated people. Highly melanated people until the last 6,000 years, which is when the zoo came. Now, what does this have to do with us? This is our lineage. This is our story. And we know it's our story because it's based on the very foundations of the priestesshood, the priestess practice from which we emerge. What makes us Chamba is that we have always been despised for holding the wisdom. And we have done so despite that. So, in a nutshell, that's what the Chamba is. We're looking at ourselves in 2026 because this is the time of Segui. We are in Segui preparation. It is the 60-year celebration of the Dogon that has happened since the beginning of time as a reparation, if you will, of the renting of the veil that was done in the Nomo, prior to the Numo descent. It is my understanding that when civilizations get to this point across the galaxy, this is the procedure. And there is the galactic egg that descends. That's where we get the aliens and the spaceship from. And this egg has to gestate for 60 years. In the Earth instance, one of the twins and one of the set decided to tear itself from the fetus and just leave, and drop out, which really caused a major, it just almost ruined the entire experiment that Amma wanted this planet to be a place where humans could carry this wisdom as a whole and embody it fully, live in nature with this consciousness eternally. Androgyny means eternity, no death. I don't want to get too much into the experiments right now, but what's important to know is his name is Ogo. And just as the Nomo came and were seen and are recorded all over the world and disseminating this wisdom all over the world, despite the fact the experiments failed as far as being able to realize the height of spiritual intelligence that was intended, those of us who took a hold of it carry this bloodline, and that's what it has to do with us. And as far as we are concerned, we have had to face this Ogo energy throughout these periods of reset as well, in which it has manifested as the jackal in the first reset, and then the second reset as the fox, which is the entity that created the zoo. Now, this zoo is what we refer to as the Anunnaki experiments, but that again is just a plagiarized mimicry of the Dogon cosmology. This zoo is where that generation of Ogo mimicked the normal experiments. So we hear about the angels that descended and mated with the women of the earth. This is what we're talking about. The Nomo did mate. And so we have the fish head, human chest, face, and fish tail body as the original spiritual images in both Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Okay? And this is the Dogon cosmology, the origin of all religions. And so we see how this has existed, but even that mimicry didn't happen until after the fox completed its experiments. And this fox is where Adam and Eve were specimens in this zoo. And why were they specimens? Why were they put in the zoo? Because remember I told you everything was in alignment with nature, and that's how they prospered. And now we're finding that they were just as intellectually as advanced in the cities, even more so in many cases than how we're living now. Highly melanated people. Melanin is a semiconductor. It has the ability to communicate multidimensionally. And so that is who we are. That's what we do. That's what we've been doing. Until the fox was able to observe us through times of prosperity and times of challenges, through these resets, which he largely causes, like the one that we're going through now. It doesn't have to be difficult. It's a matter of consciousness. And the consciousness of us was enclosed. Those of us who immigrated from Kemet, we did so at a time when pre-dynastically, when we were when there were droughts that were really starting to come in on the Nile Valley that had once been lush and fertile. There were a lot of pressures on us because the population had grown due to the prosperity. There was also a lot of infighting with the men now who were wanting to have more of a say. And that's understandable, except they used their physical strength to subdue us and to dethrone us. Of course, Pharaoh means mother's house, and Isis means her throne, and so all of those things were of the matriarchy and were taken over. And so that's how we found ourselves as refugees, basically. But we took our wisdom with us and we built wherever we went. And we did this in phases. So we were concentrated in the Fertile Crescent up through Sasu and that's us. The language that they can't decipher, just like so many things that are so indecipherable because they're us. And we were basically taken from these people who came from the mountains, these Caucasus Mountain people who enslaved us. And the fox, just like the Nomo had taught us, taught them, some of them from the Caucasus Mountains came down to our shrines and traded with us, and through the Petra and Swiss Alps and everything, traded. But this enclosure was where we were experimented on. And our consciousness was shifted from the melanated 100% semiconductor to 15%. And this was done through various means. The story of Eve with the serpent symbolizes this shift, because the serpent represents the Mami Isis Ama Nomo wisdom that was telling her, this is not the way you want to go. Continue to eat from the tree of life, the liquid law. Before Eve, which is what we explore in this week's video on the Womb Envy channel, is Lilith, her predecessor, Adam's first wife, who also ate of the fruit, but then she left. She was like, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. I'm going back to the Red Sea and waterfalls that I know, because this, what y'all doing is not happening. And she went and she built a kingdom. And that kingdom was the refortification of us. She came back and told us what was going on. And this message went around like wildfire. And that's when we started migrating more Western into Greece and into Rome, and that sort of thing. But that's where Mama Zogbe's book really kind of picks up. But she doesn't really talk about the zoo or the paradise, because that's kind of right before she kind of enters with her story, and that isn't the research that she focused on. Of course, she's focused on us knowing who we are. And so I want to tell you that when I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at how we are today, I see that those of us who left, like Lilith, we are the priestesses. And on Great Mother Speaks channel, the GMS lingo shorts define different words and what the lingo is that I use. Priestess is not a religious title. Priestess is the woman who holds down the liquid law in her domain. That's a priestess. The woman who holds down the liquid law in her domain. That's a priestess. And so when I look at this story, what I see is today there's a group of people called neurodivergents. They do not conform to the norms of the zoo. Now, the zoo, although it was an enclosure, it was mostly, as I said, a mental constricting experiment that ultimately produced a mind less than what it had been, fully melanated. So in order to do that, some melanin had to be taken out, okay? And so that empathetic yin energy that melanated people have, that soulful, impressionable energy, is that twin reality of the nomo, that internal male-female reality that we struggle with today, with the gender question. And the gender question has never been a question among the Chamba, because we know where we come from. We come from a twin identity, by nature androgynous. So how that shows up for one person may be as a fully woman identified person, and another a fully male. What's important to understand here is that the psychological confines of this twin reality versus the light distortion of the zoo. You know, when you're under observation, there are these bright lights in a laboratory, and we're told that, follow the light. Not remembering that we emerged from the darkness of the cosmos, the melanin seed, and the womb. And we have existed in these forced realities that are really truncated. And there are four that I want to leave you with today that get us into understanding why our bloodline is under attack and how we exit the garden if we haven't already. Okay? If you haven't already exited the garden and you know that you are Chamba, then you have the ability to do so. So these are some landmarks for you. When you think of any structure, you think of four corners. And so this enclosure of this zoo has four corners, which I call zoo logic. The primary cornerstone of this structure is the defilement of liquid law. It is controlling nature. It's containing nature. Okay? It is defilement of all that is nature, not honoring nature as the only authority. So that's the cornerstone of the zoo. The next corner, its stone, is astronomy come astrology. Now, this is the 1.5 variance that we have cosmically that confuses the hologram. And that's why there are glitches when we try to sustain holograms, because the reality of the zoo, of the fox, is an astrology that is egocentric. It's earth-centric. It's geocentric, okay? It's based on looking at the stars from the earth. And that enables more control of the environment based on the manipulation of nature through seasons. The third corner is matriarchy come monarchy. Now, we've talked about the transition from the matriarchy to the patriarchy being this usurpation of power that's intensified over the last 6,000 or so years since the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. Well, we're going through another drawing. Doesn't feel like that right now, but it is Pisces. It starts off that way. But Saturn will be leaving in the next year. But this has to do with misogyny becoming a value, a way of life, and understanding that this despising of the liquid law naturally translates to the despisement of the woman. This jealousy of not being able to create life. And the fourth stone is control and classification. This classifying and controlling these caste systems and categorization and compartmentalizing people and places and these grid systems and plot systems that do not align with the ley lines on the planet, which reflect the cosmos. This is the Hall of Mirrors. And this is what's important for us today, because when we look at how we have been as ancient and how we are today, as we go through this process of reclaiming our inner throne, we see this myth or this story as a spectator. But in actuality, we are still in the zoo if we have inherited the tendency to value the monarch or patriarchy over the mother. Now, I have had mama drama trauma. In fact, I healed it for 20 years and became a life coach, and I have a sister channel here on Substack called the Mama Drama Trauma Academy, in fact. But it is through this that we learn how to value our mothers even more. and we learn how to value the maternal within ourselves. This is what Lilith's journey was about. And so I want you to see how within yourself, this hatred of the mother, the hatred, the despisement of the woman is a part and parcel of being a woman today. The criticism of one another and the impossible standards that we set for one another, they really aren't from us. They come from this imprisonment, this truncated webbing field of conscious conditioning that makes us operate at only 15% of our consciousness. It's a very low vibration. And so when she left to create a kingdom, we are looking at ourselves. That's what we're doing today. Many of us as writers, as creators, as mothers, as women who are sincerely concerned and active in our communities in whatever way we can be. What feels right for us, we are the Liliths coming back and saying, hey, there's a jail that is actually taking us away, but we don't have to go into it. We're powerful enough to stand and build our own kingdom and to inform as many of us as we can to stand in our power, because it's enough. It's more than enough. Now, we know some Eves are going to be stuck. And the Eves, they'll eat of the fruit, but they won't have the full consciousness because they are still caught up in the defilement of nature, of their own nature, which is to say their own intuition, their own ability to honor life that comes from their bodies, okay? Their children. That's why we learn to have compassion for the mothers who have been conditioned in the zoo for generations. This has gone on for 6,000 years. And we're just now coming on another reset. And so even though they might taste of the fruit and they might talk the talk, they cannot walk the walk because they have forgotten that the serpent actually is the one who brought us the consciousness. That that serpentine intelligence that is able to see its way out of the zoo. That nature of the pneumo, that jointless conscious flow that can meet any moment in the moment and overcome. She has forgotten that. And she has allowed herself to be convinced that her name is Eve. And Eve means the night before. And so the night before what? The night before the control, the classification, the caste, the dark night before, that mystery before this bright light of experimentation and reclassification and defilement of our nation came into being. And so I want us to just kind of take a breath and breathe that in and allow yourself to fully embrace your identity and having an infinite state of awareness that transcends this deep space all the way back into your soul origins, into Amma and her intention, and aligning with that intention to experience all of life through your highest vibration. Now, we of the Chamba have maintained at least 85% of our consciousness, which is why we are called, or we have been designated, I should say, now as neurodivergent. We cannot be made to conform to the zoo logic. So I wanted to just share that with you today and do my best in doing that and draw a connection to what I'm trying to populate the YouTube channel with. Is just kind of the illustrations of what is being shared here. And so feel free to reach out on either channel. This, of course, is being uploaded as a podcast onto the Womb Envy Project YouTube channel. But yeah, that's zoo logic. And that's the logic that we're seeing with this season of Sugui. 60 years ago, it was 1967 to 73. They are 5-year periods, and it's beginning now in 2026, and it'll go until 2031, 32. And we're in preparation at the GMS channel for Sugui. And so you can learn more of what that's all about. And hopefully this is giving you a little bit of the why we are exiting the garden so that Eve can leave, and reclaiming our seat at the throne. We are truly blessed. Thanks for listening to Bloodline, and I'll talk to you soon.